History is not only shaped by wars. Sometimes it is shaped by signatures, by meetings held behind closed doors, by documents drafted in distant capitals, by decisions made in a single afternoon that echo for generations. Across Africa's modern history, a handful of political decisions permanently altered borders, identities, economies, and power structures. Some were made by colonial officials, some by African leaders. Some were meant to solve problems, others created new ones. But all of them changed Africa forever. Today, we examine political decisions that reshaped an entire continent. KeyCap won the Berlin Conference, 1884 to 1885, the partition of Africa. Let's begin with one of the most consequential political meetings in global history, the Berlin Conference. Convened by Otto von Bismarck in 1884, European powers gathered in Berlin to regulate the scramble for Africa. Notice who wasn't invited. Africans. At this conference, European powers established the principle of effective occupation, meaning that any European country claiming African territory had to physically occupy it. The result? Artificial borders drawn with rulers across maps. Ethnic groups divided. Rival communities forced together. Ancient political systems erased. Modern African states inherited these borders at independence. And many of today's conflict, from border disputes to ethnic tensions, trace back to that room in Berlin. One meeting. 54 countries shaped. KeyCap 2, Ghana's independence. 1957. The domino effect. When Ghana gained independence in 1957 under Kwame Nkrumah, it wasn't just a national milestone. It was continental. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to break colonial rule. This decision to grant independence triggered a domino effect. Across Africa, Nigeria followed in 1960, Tanzania in 1961, Kenya in 1963, dozens more by the mid-1960s. The political calculation by Britain that decolonization was cheaper than maintaining empire reshaped global geopolitics. Africa transformed from a colonized continent into a continent of sovereign states in less than a decade. Few political transitions in history have happened so rapidly. KeyCap 3, the formation of the Organization of African Unity, 1963. In 1963, African leaders gathered in Addis Ababa to form the Organization of African Unity. The critical decision they made? To respect colonial borders. This was a pragmatic move. Redrawing boundaries risked endless wars, but it also froze artificial divisions into permanence. This decision prevented large-scale border wars, but institutionalized colonial geography, locked in internal ethnic complexities. The OAU prioritized sovereignty over intervention, which meant it rarely interfered in internal conflicts. This shaped Africa's diplomatic culture for decades. KeyCap 4, Nigeria's creation of states, 1967. During Civil War. In 1967, amid rising tensions that would become the Nigerian Civil War, General Yakubu Gowon made a crucial decision. He broke Nigeria's 4 regions into 12 states. The goal? To weaken secessionist momentum in the eastern region and reduce regional dominance. This move reshaped Nigeria's federal structure, reduced the power of major ethnic blocs, set the foundation for Nigeria's modern state system. Today, Nigeria has 36 states. That single wartime political decision permanently altered the balance of power in Africa's most populous country. KeyCap 5, the adoption of one-party states in the 1960s-70s. In the years after independence, several African leaders made a deliberate choice to adopt one-party systems. Leaders like Julius Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, argued that multi-party politics would fuel ethnic division. Their decisions centralized authority. Short-term stability often increased, but long-term consequences included weak democratic institutions, a culture of executive dominance, or military coups across West and Central Africa. Between 1960 and 1990, Africa experienced over 70 successful coups. The political architecture built in the 1960s shaped decades of governance challenges. KeyCap 6, Egypt's Camp David Accords, 1978. When Anwar Sadat signed the Camp David Accords with Israel in 1978, it shocked the Arab world and Africa. Egypt became the first Arab and African country to formally recognize Israel. The consequences were immediate. Egypt was suspended from the Arab League. Sadat was later assassinated. Egypt repositioned itself geopolitically toward the United States. This decision altered North Africa's political alignment permanently. Keycap 7. The end of apartheid, 1994. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections. The decision by apartheid leaders to negotiate rather than escalate conflict changed the trajectory of Southern Africa. Under Nelson Mandela, South Africa transitioned without descending into racial civil war. This political compromise preserved economic stability, elevated South Africa as a continental power, became a global model for negotiated transitions. It proved that political decisions can dismantle systems as entrenched as apartheid. Keycap 8. The creation of the African Union, 2002. In 2002, African leaders replaced the OAU with the African Union. This marked a shift. Unlike the OAU, the AU reserved the right to intervene in member states under certain conditions, including genocide and war crimes. This was a major philosophical change. From absolute sovereignty to conditional sovereignty, it reflected lessons learned from the Rwandan genocide of 1994, where international and continental inaction had devastating consequences. Keycap 9. South Sudan's independence, 2011. In 2011, South Sudan became Africa's newest country. The referendum allowing secession was a landmark political decision. It represented the first successful redrawing of colonial borders, a recognition that some historical divisions could not be contained within existing states. But the aftermath, civil war beginning in 2013, also demonstrated how fragile new political entities can be. Independence does not automatically equal stability. Keycap 10. The African Continental Free Trade Area, 2018. In 2018, African nations signed the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA. If fully implemented, it will create the largest free trade area in the world by number of countries. This decision could increase intra-African trade, reduce dependency on external markets, strengthen continental bargaining power. For the first time since independence, Africa is attempting economic integration at scale. If successful, this may become one of the most transformative political decisions of the 21st century. Political decisions matter. A conference in Berlin created borders that still define states. An independence declaration in Ghana accelerated continental liberation. A decision to preserve colonial borders prevented wars but froze complexities. A negotiation in South Africa avoided bloodshed. A trade agreement may redefine Africa's economic future. History is not random. It is shaped by choices. And the question for Africa today is simple. What political decisions are being made right now that future generations will say changed everything? Because somewhere, in a presidential office, a cabinet meeting, or a continental summit, the next decision that reshapes Africa is already being discussed. If this breakdown gave you a deeper perspective on African political history, subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, which political decision do you believe had the greatest long-term impact on Africa, and why? This is Chronicles of Africa, and history is still being written.